Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of Ozark United FC. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. They are dedicated to helping you create, record, and publish high-quality podcasts for your audience. Be sure to check them out today at podcastvideos.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Wes Harris, Managing Director for Ozark United FC, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. Today, I am super stoked about my guest, U.S. soccer legend, playing all over the world in all kinds of different competitions, leagues, teams that you guys will know, Mr. John Harkes. Now technical director for the McLean Youth Soccer in Virginia. John, thank you so much, man, for joining me today. I can't wait to dive in.
No, my pleasure, Wes. Great to be on with you. Looking forward to our discussion on many platforms. So, and then making sure that we get, this wrapped up in time for us to watch the Liverpool-Tottenham match today.
I know that's probably the most. I did wear the DC United jersey for you today. That is my uniform. Every podcast episode is to wear a jersey. I made sure to bring that one. I love yours even more.
McAllister on the back. The true midfielder.
He's doing such an awesome job. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So how are you?
I'm great, man. We're doing all kinds of great things. But one of the things that we do is this podcast to kind of educate people on what we're doing, get people more excited about the game and, soccer 101, but also talking to people that have been there, done that in other markets, kind of like yourself within our league, but also as a player and experienced that growth within the sport over the last, 40 years or so. So first, let's just start from the beginning, give people a little bit about you, your background, and how you kind of found the game.
Yeah, so grew up in Kearney, New Jersey, Kearny. Big, massive history of soccer in that town.
Soccer town, USA, man.
Yeah, Tom McCabe, friend of ours, historian in the game, did a great job putting that together with Tab and Tony and I, and having three players play on the same World Cup teams, 2 World Cups. It was crazy. From such a small, maybe 40,000 population at the time, in that town, 36,000 maybe. And it just, a lot of people, what they don't know about this, Wes, is that the game goes back in Kearney way before us in our generation. There were other players that played, on the World Cup teams from Kearney. And not a lot of people know that, and people don't really talk about that much. So from my perspective, I love the history of the game. I am very respectful of the people that have, worked really hard and tirelessly to build the game in our country. I always have time for people like that. It's a big respect for me for different coaches, players, that have had their own journeys, and had given us opportunities to step in, and like you said, build things. And, I love, the fact that I was able to, at 4 years old, start playing with a recreation team, the U7s, and with my brother's team that my dad let me play, probably legally. And my dad coached me all my youth career up until I went to UVA. He didn't touch us when we were at Kearney High School, because at those days back in the day, Kearney High School and the high school game was that's where you got recruited to go to college, whereas now the platform's changed. It's in some states it's club, and in some states it's still, the high school programs are really strong. It's based on what you have. But my dad raised my brother and I, my sister Debbie. My mom was always supportive, and really in Kearney, it was a very unique kind of situation where, you've heard this saying, it takes a village, well, we had the village. We had, if it wasn't my parents taking me to a game, or it was somebody else's parents, or we were jumping in this van, or we were hitchhiking down to New Jersey State tryouts. It was crazy. We just did everything we could, and there wasn't a lot of outdoor kind of structure. It was just more or less find yourself and survive in the game. And, one of the biggest things that I remember from my youth days was that my dad had so much passion, coming from Scotland, and he played himself. My mom both, came from Scotland as well. In the town of Kearney, it was a lot of Scottish, English, and Irish immigrants at that time that had come over for work. There was a couple of industrial textile companies called the Clark Thread Company, and they started some of the really semi-pro teams back in the day, and even competed in the Open Cup. It goes back as far as the 1800s in Kearney.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And so for me, it was like, here we are, we're on this journey, and it was done, way before us. So we have to have that understanding. And my parents were very supportive, loving, didn't have a lot. It was a very blue collar town, hardworking town. But I did grow up with a very optimistic approach and enthusiastic approach to the game and to people. I love collaborating and sharing ideas and meeting people and understanding what their background is and where they came from and what makes them tick, So soccer connects you in all ways. And I was very fortunate to grow up in the game and have that success and, have those opportunities because, soccer just really gave me a chance to go to UVA, University of Virginia, one of the top schools in the country, to get an education, but also to play and compete for Bruce Arena and Dave Saracen and grow up and mature and then have an opportunity to play in the Olympics in 88 and then, 90, 94 World Cup. So yeah, it's a long journey, but I had a lot of people supporting me along that, and a lot of people that through my ups and downs and my childhood, immaturity and mistakes and everything else, they still believed in me and gave me love. And so that helped push me on to the next levels. And so when I retired from playing, it was more like I was involved in media. I loved commentating on the game. I loved bringing a different perspective. And, from my experience for 6 years playing overseas in the UK and England and the Premier League and everything, and working at Sky Sports over there, it seemed natural for me, but I was always coaching. And, I was always coaching youth and my son and my two daughters. And my wife's a footballer as well. She played pro overseas when I was playing in England, which was kind of unheard of at that time. So it's ingrained in us, in our family. I never forced my kids to play. It was just always there. And, the number one thing for us is like, do they have good character? Are they humble? And are they, nice people as they grow up? And then the sport and everything else is bonuses, and so my son Ian's playing. He's a pro. He's going into his 9th year. He'll be with San Jose Earthquakes this year. My daughter Lauren, she went to Clemson University under Eddie Radwanski, great coach. And she learned a lot and played really well there. And then she went to Creighton and did a master's program there and played under Ross Pauly, another great coach, another great leader. And she went over to Denmark and played pro and enjoyed that. And now she's back here working for U.S. Club Soccer down in Charleston. We just moved her down there last weekend. And my youngest daughter went to Elon University, played D1 there as well. And then she went overseas and got a master's program at Oxford University,
Wow.
smart cookie. And she graduated there and is working for a company in London. And so, my wife's a Catholic school principal and has been a coach, and a former player. She's a great leader, a great mentor for kids. And that's kind of a nutshell where we are.
I love that, man. And
sorry, man, I rambled the whole first section.
No,
sorry about that.
Never apologize, John. I mean, those are the great episodes, right? When you get to really know people. And I love this medium for that. But, you talked a lot about, you and your family and your town and the engagement within the game. And how, it's good to hear around the help that, and to use your word, the love that you had surrounding you on your journey through it. Chris Martinovich, our co-founder, has a great saying from his coach Manny Schellscheidt in college. First A licensed coach, I believe, in the U.S. But he used to say, "If you love the game, it'll love you back."
Very true. And I was very fortunate to know Manny Schellscheidt, and got a great story about him. Actually, he was the rival team in Union, New Jersey, and it was my dad. We were playing with my dad's team, and then my dad was probably looking at me from a perspective of like, how can I push John, and what, and he asked me to guest play for Manny, which was, the Union Lancers were like the rival to Kearney Thistle FC. And I was like, I'm not playing for them. And he was like, oh, yes, you are this weekend. And I was like, what? So I went and played for Manny. And I don't know if you want to hear the story, but I learned a great lesson from Manny Schellscheidt.
Let's hear it, man. I'm all about it.
So Manny, just for a lot of people listening out there, was the old school, like you said, the first A licensed coach, I believe, in this country. And, but he, German background, his influence was caring about the people, such a great manager of people. And, he was kind of like, you were in awe of him almost. You were scared of him. You feared him because of the way his stature was, but we knew he was such a great manager. And my dad wanted to get me a new edge to myself, I guess. And so I went and guest played with Manny in a tournament on the weekend. It was just a one-day thing because we had two games already. And then it was the third day I was going there. And I started for his team, which was great. And I ended up scoring, and we were up 1-0. Right towards the end of the first half, we were up 1-0 in the beginning of the game, and one of their players equalized. And Manny at halftime, there was 1-1, and we were talking, and he was asking like players accountability, like, what do you think about this play and stuff like that. And then as we came back out, I wasn't selected to go back in. I thought, I'm a guest player, that's fine, I'll just take what I get. But then the rest of the game, I didn't play at all. And I was wondering, wow, man, what the heck happened there? And I think I was about 14 at the time. And I couldn't understand, like, why. I'm like, Dad, how come you didn't let me play? Because I guess that's a question for Manny, not me. And I was like, oh, I'm not calling the coach, So there's no way. And it just kept troubling me because I was like, I want to compete with this group. It was so good. And I said, okay, no matter what. And I waited and waited. But it was about 2 a.m, and I couldn't sleep. And I finally woke up, and I went through the other room, and I shook my dad. I go, Dad, I know why. And my dad knew why. It was because I let the guy run through, and I didn't transition defend in the midfield. And that was my player. And he wanted to give me a chance to speak out and say that, but maybe I was too immature or young at that time. And I didn't. But I said, can I call Coach Schellscheidt in the morning? He's like, my dad's like, yes, you can. He goes, good for you. Go back to bed. So I did. And I called him, and I said, we had a long talk. And when I said, I think I understand why I didn't get a chance to play second half. And I presented it to him, and he goes, aha. So you've been thinking about the game. He goes, that's what I was trying to get you to do at halftime. And I'm like, sorry, I'm just so competitive. I couldn't think about it. But ever since then, he made me change the way I play in the midfield. And I became a more true number 8 box-to-box midfielder, not just attacking and creating. I was at that age, I started adding defensive to me, posture, grittiness, and, coming out of New Jersey, out of Kearney, I had to do that to survive. And so he pushed me to add that even more, made me focus on it. So he changed me as a player, without a doubt.
That's such a cool story, man. I love those. That's such an awesome story.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, and you kind of touched on this with kind of how things have changed a little bit, but talk a little bit about your pathway. Like, how everybody wants to understand and talk, or how did they get to where they got to within their playing career? What was because it's very different, then versus now, in a lot of respects. Some of it's the same, but there's and not everybody's is the same, right? There's multiple pathways, but what was yours like?
It was back in the day, that platform was completely different. Like I said before, it was like, we were getting picked out of high schools, people were coming to watch us freshman year, on the varsity team, or sophomore year. And, it was like state champions. We were in the state finals 4 years in a row. We went undefeated in our was in my junior year, I think 24-0. And, people were coming to watch us play at the high school level. My dad coaches in the club level, Thistle football club, Thistle FC, which still exists today and is running really well. And the next generation of people that grew up in that club are managing it now really well. So great players. And, it was different. The structure was different. But at the same time, what never changed, I think, is that if you're good enough, you're going to be seen. And whether, you had to have patience through that process, and you had to go through the whole ODP, some of the old school first platforms of ODP back in the day. That's how old I am. And state tournaments and tryouts and all that stuff. It was great. But yeah, it came down to, of course, talent. Like, you've got to have talent to get recognized, but that's not everything. And even today, when I'm coaching in McLean and, as a youth club in our community, or whether I was coaching at FC Cincinnati or coaching at New York Red Bulls with Bruce Arena, or coaching in Greenville, in the USL as well, in League One, it was always about doing honest, hard work. I mean, the players that put the work in and put the extra training in and the detail-oriented training, and that really showed, and it really helped you kind of grow. And I think it was always ingrained in me to do that. I didn't know anything else but to be honest and work and fight and compete and help out my teammates. It was never just about me. It was always about a group, of people. I think that was more or less, that edge that I always had. I think I've always had that edge in also being a builder and starting up clubs and building clubs from the ground up, because I have that kind of that grittiness, that edge about me to prove to other people around the world that the Americans can do it, that we can grow our own leagues. Like, we went for an absence after the Cosmos folded, and I was a ball boy for the Cosmos, and I got to interact with Pele and Cruyff and Giorgio Canaglia and Santiago Formosa, who came from Kearney and made it as a pro. And so that was like, I was right there. I was in the backyard. It was 20 minutes from my home, playing at Giant Stadium. And I always wanted that. But there was that absence when that folded, the NASL folded, and there was nothing for us. And so there was no professional leagues unless you went indoor. It was kind of obscure, and, specific towns or states across the country had teams, and not everybody did. It was, smaller kind of platform. But I wanted to continue to grow and become a better player. And I think that edge always kind of pushed me to say, like, we can do it as an American, and I still have that today. And that's why you see me going to the USL and becoming the sporting director and the head coach and growing the game and giving players opportunities and coaching staff opportunities to grow in the game as well. I think it's fantastic. I love that part. So I'll continue to do that if I get the opportunities. But I think that's kind of me in a nutshell. Like, how did I get connected to the game? I love it. It's in my blood. It's everything. You throw a ball out there, Wes, you know this, and players and families and kids, and so inclusive. Everybody just comes together around a ball. That's the best thing in the world, right?
It is. It was actually Matt McConaughey when he got interviewed about his involvement with Austin FC. He said something that really stuck with me, and I love it, is the way that he put it was, it's the world's universal handshake. You just throw a ball down and you say, you don't need to say a single word. You don't need to speak the same language. You throw a ball down and it's, let's go, let's have some fun, let's play some footy. And you're going to get that in 90% of the corners of the world, and then that's my favorite thing about the sport, is the way that it connects people and brings people together in a whole host of different ways, not just players, but and impacts communities for the better. So that's awesome, man. I love that. Talk about you. I mean, you're one of the few that's made it, and talk about your experience playing in. You've played in MLS, you played in the Premier League, you played in Olympics, you played in World Cups. Talk about what that's like, man. And I don't care where you go, but you've hit you have one of the most famous goals in Premier League history at Sheffield Wednesday, to be specific. That could go very wrong for a certain subset of that town. But anyway, talk about what it's like being a professional player. I mean, you always, for people listening and players, there's obviously a difference between making it to, the collegiate level or the academy level now, and you're on the cusp of breaking it into the first team, and then the difference between making it that far and then those players that are really, really great that get to have that chance on the world stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. It's like it's everybody uses these cliches, but it's a dream come true, to play at that level. I mean, to represent your nation is absolutely an incredible honor. And from the first time that I got, recognized to go and play for the youth national team, or, in the Olympics in Seoul, Korea in 88, even, to the first time that you play for your national team, senior national team, it's just like the most proud moment. But it's also, the humblingest moment, because, there's so many other people that could be there, and they want that jersey and that opportunity too. So, you've got to take that and run with it and do the best you could to always add to your game. And I constantly ask players that all the time now at the pro levels. It's like, even the youth levels, it's like, what are you adding to your game? And they're like, what? Like, you're a good player, but what are you adding? What are you working on now? And they're always like, I don't know. I'm like, well, somebody else is always working on their game, so you got to do that, and that, I think that's part of my growth. When I was younger, I was always trying to do different things and be creative and artistic and have imagination. But I mean, I guess I always had that grittiness to compete and win challenges and defend well, and and be hard, not to to shy away from any tackles or anything like that. So but I always thought too, though, those moments that I've had, and you mentioned the goal of the year that I received and against Derby County for Sheffield Wednesday. It was in a cup match, and we ended up going to the League Cup final and beating Man United that year at Wembley. That was in the first 7 months that I was in England, so it was crazy. But I always knew that I'm very lucky to have that platform, and I better use it for positive change, and to have some positivity in somebody else's life. And if I could, connect the game or put a smile on someone's face, or go do a visit at a hospital or leukemia and lymphoma society, like, I was very fortunate to use soccer and that platform to be able to reach so many other people. If the minute that you lose that, then you lose yourself and what your purpose is. So I've kept that with me all the time, and I still do those things. And charity, begins in the home, but charity is very critical for everybody to do and take part in. So I think I love the game that much, and it's awesome to grow it at different levels, but it's always so good to give back and to give into your community. It's the most important thing for everybody. And if you can do that, then I think you're doing the right things.
I love that. And I love that about the league and how, in particular, USL is such a grassroots-based league and very, very, very active. All the teams are in their communities in different ways. And it's not to say that, other leagues don't do this, because they do. But it's so important for the overall model within USL. And it's something that everybody across the board, along the organizations, to the players, to the technical staff, are super passionate about. And when you can find that, that sets everybody up for something special, right?
I agree. And you look at Ozark and, what you and like Chris, Martinovich and everybody, like their vision, but their mission statement is to be a community club. It's to really represent the community the right way and to have those opportunities, and both for both genders, for the men and the women, for the boys and the girls. It's critical. So it's establishing that culture, is the first thing to do. And that's not easy. That is not easy. And people say it and they can throw out the buzzwords, but the action that you take is critical to back that up. And knowing how to manage that along the way is critical as well. Can't get ahead of yourself, and you can't get caught up in the wins and loss columns if you're not winning off the field, for sure. And so that's important. And I'm excited for you guys and what you're doing, with Ozark United. It looks like an amazing project, good people. As well as I do, you're only as good as the people around you. And when you look to build it the right way like that with the right people, it's fantastic. Such a great point.
I love that. Thanks, John. Well, I think we'll leave it there for part one of our convo. John Harkes, U.S. soccer legend, thank you so much, man, for joining me for this episode of Pitch to Pro. For everybody listening, remember that you can find us at pitchtopro.com or wherever you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify. And until next time, Northwest Arkansas, cheers. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pitch to Pro podcast. Be sure to tune in again in 2 weeks for the next installment. And check out the Stoppage Time series for a recap of today's episode. Be sure to find us at Pitch to Pro on YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Until next time, Northwest Arkansas, cheers.